This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, coming at you. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back and binge listening to the episodes. I get a lot of messages about that, which I truly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for the 5-star reviews we've been receiving. It's a royal we. It's really just me, but I do appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I want to say thank you to the people who have been writing me emails, encouraging me to keep doing the show and not to listen to the detractors and the cop haters. I always like in those emails. And I love the emails about young coppers who get into the job because they hear the men and women on the show and they get inspired and then they want to do it because the good Lord knows we need more peacekeepers out there, not less. So thank you for all those encouraging words. I truly appreciate it. This episode is brought to you by officerprivacy.com. It's officerprivacy.com/TPS if you want to show the show some love. Bottom line is your information is all over the internet and it's easy to find. There's gigantic databases that harvest and collect our information. With a simple Google search, you can be found if you do nothing at all to prevent that. You don't want crazies and criminals coming to your door. You're on shift. People you've dealt with in the past are coming to your house looking for you. It's easy to find you. Why not make it much more difficult? Like I've said before in the past, I know officers that have had dealings with criminals, and those criminals became obsessive and easily found them and harassed them for one guy for over a year until the guy finally charged the bench and threatened to kill the judge, at which point they thought, well, maybe he should do some jail time now. You can threaten the cop's family and his wife, but you threaten the judge, you're going to prison. So that's a real story that happened, guys. Protect yourselves. It's worth the investment. I use this product. It's really great. You sign up. They give you initial readout of all the databases, and if you're on there or not. And if you are, they have requested to take you off. And then you get a secondary readout report that shows you where you've been removed from all the databases, and it's oh so satisfying. So that's officerprivacy.com/TPS. The link is in the show notes, so it's super easy to get there. Go check them out. Support the show by supporting our excellent sponsor. All right, guys, today I have a really great show. I've been waiting a while to do it. We've had some conflicts with schedule. My guest is a busy man. I'm also just a slob with my schedule, and I'm also very busy working. So we've made it happen. It's in person, which is rare for the show. So he's a local guy, so he's able to come to the house. I'm very excited about it. And it's kind of a unique situation where I've been chatting with Tom for the last couple years. I've been friends probably just under 3 years. Met him at my church when we moved here. And liked him right away, by the way, because we exchanged contacts, and his contact said Thomas Connell, patriarch, which I like, which I thought was really cool. But just a great dude. So excited to have him here. But we'd go to a cookout or have a beer together, and we would just talk first responder stories, cop stories. He was a firefighter for a while in Southern California, and then for many years here in Massachusetts. But his father was a local cop for many years, and he ended up writing out his memoirs, some stories, some of the incredible and unbelievable things that he saw on duty. And Tom was relaying them to me, and along with his own stories over a bunch of times of just hanging out. And I was like, I'd be a fool if I didn't invite Tom onto the show because he's got between him and his dad, it's like lights out. I got to get him on here. So let me just give you a quick bio. I'll start with Tom. He started fire service in 1990, part-time Riverside County in California for Cal Fire. He did industrial emergency response, which included emergency medical response, hazardous materials response, and technical rescue for Bayer Corporation for 6 years. He taught urban search and rescue for 20 years and served as a call firefighter for 14 years in Westminster and Princeton, Massachusetts. Also, Tom's the author and editor of the book Technical Rescue for Structural Collapse, which was the first instructional textbook for that subject. So he knows his stuff, and he's got the stories, believe me. His father, Tom Sr., retired as a sergeant from the Templeton Police Department after 19 years, spanning across 3 different departments. He retired after having a heart attack on the job. where he had some chest pain, flipped on his blue lights, and drove himself to the ER. And Tom's got something to say about that. He also was a rape investigator, a satanic crimes investigator, which is fascinating to me, and also one of the coordinators for Project Harmony, the law enforcement exchange program between U.S. cops and Russian cops as a part of the effort to teach Russian cops community policing. Think the Schwarzenegger movie when he comes over and he's a cop, something like that. Without further ado, let me bring on the great Thomas Connell. Tom!
Hey.
Finally, man.
Yeah, no kidding. It's been, we've been trying to do this for a long time.
It's great to have you on the show, brother. It's great to have you in person.
This is going to be fun, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been looking forward to it.
You're one of those guys that has you've accrued so much experience in this field that you're like a bottomless well of the stories that come back to you while talking to you.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm a bottomless well of experience or just a halfway decent storyteller.
You have a bit of wisdom that you've told me before, because I had a similar, the opposite conversation with my father, where I told my dad I wanted to be a cop, and he said, "Why don't you be a fireman?" And your father told you
it was just the opposite. Yeah, right. No, it was the first year. The first year I worked. It's 1990. I'm in Sun City Station 7, which was Riverside County, California Department of Forestry station. They call it Cal Fire now.
Right. Huge service.
And it was a busy station. Like we were probably the busiest station in the county. We were doing 15, 20 calls a day, like easy.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's hot too.
You don't even go back. Like you clear a call, and before you can drive back to the station, they got you dispatched out on another call.
Right.
So anyway, and it was very, very interesting because Sun City was Sun City was a retirement community. And at the time, the population was about 10,000 people, right? So this is just outside of Paris. And I know you know that area.
My buddy
right?
lived in Paris for a while.
Yep. And Paris was kind of rough. It may still be. This is 30 years ago. And so we did a lot of different kinds of calls, but our station motto was "Start your day with a DOA." Welcome to Sun City, because we had a population, of people that were over 65. You had to be 65 to get property there. So 10,000 people over 65.
That's what I hear. I heard the older people came out of LA for more affordable living, but then the nephews followed.
Yeah.
The gangbangers.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. I have so many stories I could tell you, but I can't. I'll tell you real quick, right? And this is not one of your cute stories. Sorry, but there was a Knights of Columbus.
Yep.
And the folks would come out of Paris to Sun City because it was quiet and safe. And so there's a wedding at the Knights of Columbus. And honestly, I don't remember if it was an ex-Bloods dude or ex-Crips, right? Because they had both. They came out. He had tried to get himself out, the kind of like the I'm going to extract myself and be legit story.
Hold the mic a little bit lower. It's popping a little bit.
Sorry.
There you go.
Is that better? Okay. Anyway, long story short, the opposite gang showed up, crashed the wedding, big fight, lots of blood. We get called out, medical aid. We have to stage for a while so the sheriffs can get there and make the scene safe.
Sure.
And we go in, and this guy comes up to me, and I'm like, wrote at this point, "Are you okay? Are you hurt? Are you injured anywhere?" He's like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, okay. And he turns around to walk away from me, and he has a knife stuck in the back of his neck. Like right up to the hilt, right?
I'm good.
I mean, it's not a big buck knife or anything, but he's got a knife stuck in the back of his neck. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." So it's like it was such a huge mix of the kind of calls. Anyway, to get back to your question, I had called my dad because that day we got shot at. We went to a house, knocked on the door, announced there's a fire department. And
the good guys, not the cops.
Apparently, I'm sorry, I did it again, right? I keep moving the mic. Apparently, our station captain had been there before. So boom, 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 fire department. And he grabs me, kind of by the scruff of the neck and pulls me away from the front of the door. And we're there. And then we hear and like, boom, right through the door.
Oh,
so I'm like, oh, wow, this is cool.
yeah.
Because I'm young and just out of the military and I'm still thinking this is cool, right?
I'm going to live forever.
I'm going to live forever. Absolutely. Get back to the station. Later in the day, I ring up my father and I'm like, hey, Dad, do you still have that second chance vest? Because he had moved on to more of the almost kind of body armor kind of thing.
Sure.
But this was like one of those T-shirt kind of vests. And I'm like, I'll take anything I can get. I said, can you pop it in the mail and send it out to me? And I tell him about the story and he says, you'd make a really good cop. You really should go into law enforcement. And I'm like, Dad, I haven't been a firefighter all that long, but I have learned something. I've heard all your stories growing up. I said, a 911 call comes in. You go to a house. It's a domestic. You get there and you're there to help the woman who's inside. And 20 minutes into this, you got this guy in cuffs and you're taking him out and she's trying to brain you with the cast iron frying pan because you're taking her man away and she's already changed her mind about this. Right. And I said, and that's the reaction that you get for doing your job and helping people. I said, me, on the other hand, I said, I can go to a house. I can dump 1,500 gallons of water in their living room, pull down the ceiling, break some windows, get a smoke ejector going. By the time I leave, Dad's going to give me a firm handshake. Mom's going to hand me a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies. And the cute teenage daughter's going to give me a kiss on the cheek. What job, Dad, would you rather do?
Damn firefighters.
Yeah. And it's funny. And my father actually told that story to other cops like for years after that.
Yeah.
He thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love that. I love the opposite ways to look at it. But yeah, I mean, I don't. We police and fire always go back and forth with each other, teasing each other. But they around these parts in Massachusetts, firefighters are also medical. They're not. You're not just going to be an engineer. You're going to be. You're getting in there with the guts and the gore and you're holding people's hands when they're dying. Like that to me is. That's one of the most traumatic things I do as a cop is when I go to someone's dying or a bad crash when they're going to die, and spending extended periods of time with them bothers me, and it gets alleviated when the EMS, the fire guys, show up and take over, like a higher level of care. Yeah. That's what they teach you in, higher level of care shows up.
Absolutely.
EMT shows up, paramedic, doctor, whoever, you're on. This is your deal, So they're both the jobs are obviously completely incredibly brutal, but
it's why both we all go to gallows humor,
right?
Like
absolutely.
It's not just cops, firefighters. We do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't laugh about it, if you don't make light, and other people when they listen in, they're like, oh, those guys are sick.
Yeah.
And no, we're not. It's therapy. I mean, we do this.
If you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You're trying to compartmentalize it and keep it in the back, so to speak.
I've been on some bodies before where it's like when you first show up, it's just cops. Yeah. And then other people are showing up. Well, you're there long enough, family will show up. Yeah. Family will be present. And then it's a big thing for everybody, all the first responders to check each other. Family's here. Because everybody's smoking and joking.
Yeah.
And we're standing around grandpa or whoever. And it's like, so we always go,
yeah, well, but the other thing that after you've done the job for a while, it's like instinctive. If a family member's there, I've worked on dead people, like really worked them hard, knowing that this is an absolute waste of time.
It's a show,
right? It's a show.
Sure,
it's an absolute. But I want the people to see that, like, we're pulling out all the stops.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
We're doing everything we can. And then let a real professional who can help them deal with the grief they can do that later, right? We just got to get them through the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not. I'm not saying that cops would stand around and we're not joking about the dead person, but we just go back to like regular life and start joking about, hey, busting each other's chops. And
absolutely,
it can just look bad. It's almost like when if you're at a funeral for an auntie that was 103 and you're there for 3 hours at the calling hours, and eventually you start joking around with your uncles or whatever, and then you're like in the back of your head like, oh, this probably doesn't look great.
Yeah,
because we're laughing and joking. But
yeah,
absolutely, gallows humor is a necessity. All right, Tom. So how we talked about doing it is I'll just go through the normal questions.
Sure.
And then you've got stories. Your dad's got stories, Tom Sr., which I think is really cool, are going to be heard. So I'll ask the question. You just pick where you want to go. So
all right, sure.
You have a first hot call, first time one of you went to a call and really got your blood going.
Yeah, so we'll do my dad first, right?
Okay.
And little bit on the background, right? So my father wrote a book, essentially. It's got 36 or 37 chapters, and each chapter is a different call or a different experience, during his career. Unfortunately, there's an outline of chapters at the end that he never got a chance to finish, and some of them would have been really good.
Yeah.
I just, but he didn't do it for the money. He did it because when he was gone, he wanted his children. I've got 3 siblings.
Yep.
And his grandchildren to know what he did for a living. And he wanted to be able to share that, but he wanted them to be able to, he wanted to share it when they were old enough to absorb and understand and kind of really get it.
Yeah.
And so that's what this was. And I've considered for many years putting this together and just putting it out there. It's not a money-making thing. It's, but I think some of the stories are pretty cool. So first hot call. My dad, we'll do him first. This is actually day 2 of him being a cop.
So this is
all right.
New.
This is new. And so just to for the guys that are big city guys and folks who have gone, younger guys now that are going through the process.
Yep.
My dad, he writes this. He says, I didn't think of being a police officer until after my son was born. That'd be me. I didn't do anything about it until I was 32. I interviewed with the state police, and at the end of the interview discovered I was too old to qualify. The age cutoff was 32. I thought this was applicable to all police departments in Massachusetts, and I felt that a career in law enforcement just wasn't going to happen. At age 35, I discovered the cutoff for a municipal cop was 35, not 32. Then I heard there were a lot of communities with non-civil service, and I lived in one of them. So I went to the chief of police, and I was told there were no openings. 6 months later, I was called back into his office. The deal was this. I had to put in 800 hours as a ride-along.
Wow.
Without compensation, and then pass the Brown Book exam. I'd have to purchase all my uniforms and equipment, including my weapon, out of pocket. If I passed my training, I'd be put to work part-time at $2.25 an hour. All right, just
they used to get away with.
Just to set the stage, right? $2.25 an hour. Now I wonder now I know why my dad used to work, like road details.
Oh yeah.
On Sundays and holidays, right?
For like $8 an hour.
Yeah, double time, right? Or triple time. So anyway, chief calls him into the office and he says that he passed the training and he'd requested the selectman to appoint him as a part-time police officer. There's an open shift this coming Friday, midnight to 8. Did I want it? He says, of course I wanted it. My insides were doing cartwheels. He handed me a badge, a Smith & Wesson Model 10 38-357, and 18 rounds of 38 special ammunition. And that was it. He was a cop. My first shift was boring and I didn't get a single call. My second shift the following night was a completely different story. Saturday night, 11:45, cruiser pulled into my driveway. I was ready and standing by the door when I heard the quiet muscle of a Plymouth Fury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old school.
Back when cruisers were real cruisers. I took the officer I was relieving home and headed to the station to review the activity logs since the previous night. Lieutenant was dispatching my shift and told me he'd keep it quiet for the rookie. About 5 past midnight, I pulled into a major highway when the lieutenant came on the air. 832 to W5, W5. You have a motorcycle accident on the westbound on-ramp to the highway. Rescues being dispatched. W5 to 832, 10-4. My Plymouth Fury roared to life as I toggled the light and siren switches. Move over, Adam 12. Here I come. I was less than a mile away from my first experience with death. So I wonder how many people like Adam 12. That's like natural to me. I watched that as a kid.
Yeah,
I wonder how many of your listeners have no clue what Adam 12 was.
Probably a fair amount, but a lot of our cop culture fans, so they might know. It's an old LAPD show.
So the on-ramps are gentle to begin with, and just before you merge with the highway, the curve sharpens. Richard Skip Ryder had spent the evening getting drunk at the local inn, a popular watering hole for the 20-something set. Problem was, Skip was a high school senior with a bogus ID. He compounded this by not putting on a helmet when he climbed on his bike. His third mistake was entering the on-ramp at Mach 1. He failed to negotiate the final fifth of the on-ramp and struck the granite curbing, which caused him to go over the handlebars. However, he hung on to the handlebars, which means he propelled the bike in 2 cartwheels on the grassy medium, separated by the bike from the sign saying no U-turns, bending the signpost in an ankle and dropping Skip at the base. The motorcycle continued on its journey to the highway, coming to rest in another 100 feet of the point of impact. Skip's moaning, but there's no blood. He's unconscious, and my dad was amazed. Rescue arrived, as did the off-duty police officer, because it's a small town and it's a midnight shift.
Yep.
And there's one guy in one car available,
Yep.
right, until you get somebody coming from next door. They packaged him up, rushed him to a hospital 6 miles west of the incident. That'd be Haywood, out in Gardner, right?
Yep.
A few moments later, rescue signed back on and announced they were en route to another hospital about 10 miles east of the accident because the ER doc had decided Skip needed more expertise at a larger hospital, so they moved him off to Leominster. Rescue announced they were beginning CPR, and as the rescue truck paused the accident scene, Skip died in the bus. And my father says, I was taking measurements when dispatch came on the air again and said, hey, the city police just called there in pursuit of a stolen car heading in our direction. Told them you were tied up with a fatal. And just at that moment, a vehicle and 2 cruisers, sirens blaring, roared across the bridge over the accident scene. And minutes later, Fitchburg reports that they lost the vehicle. He says, 10-4, any description? Roger that. It's a black Volkswagen Beetle, Massachusetts, bug out. 10-4, Volkswagen. And he's thinking, how can 2 cruisers lose a VW Beetle?
Yeah, like 50 horsepower.
Yeah, absolutely. He says, I cleared the scene, continued west on the highway, getting off at the next exit. I noticed an abandoned black VW Beetle. Checked the car, same registration. The ignition was popped. He reports it in. He says, tell Fitchburg we have the vehicle, request a tow. And he's still thinking, how can anybody not catch a VW? But what do I know? It's only my second shift. And just as he radios that in, he gets 832 to W5. I just got a report of a break-in at 21 Lake Street. The residents arrive home to see 4 or 5 kids flee from the rear of their house and run into the woods. I'm going to move through this. Turns out they stole a whole bunch of guns.
Nice.
Right? So now he's got a fatal. He's got a stolen vehicle with missing occupants. He's got a B&E where they stole all the guns in the house. All right? And it's his second night on duty.
On a 1-cop shift.
On a 1-cop shift, right? On a 1-cop shift. So they call it in. He says, it's 1974. We don't have any detectives. We don't have any dogs. Has no idea what to do. So he calls it in, and they call the chief at home in the middle of the night and say, what do you want to do? The chief says, I'll handle it in the morning, right? And just as that happens, it comes back. 832 to 5. They've even dropped the W's at this point. The chief's going to handle it. Be advised, you have an overturned vehicle on the highway a mile east of where the fatal was. It's in the westbound lane. There's nobody around. Notify both hospitals here if the ERs are treating for injuries, et cetera, et cetera. He gets there. The witnesses said the occupants were picked up by a motorist. The car reeks of booze. His observation is, I didn't know we had that many cars out here because traffic is backed up on Route 2, like as far as you can see. And it's 2:00 in the morning. And he gets back to the station, and the parents from the very first fatal are there. And now he's got to tell them that their son has passed away in the motorcycle accident. And as he's getting through this, he's like trying to get through the paperwork, and the occupants of the overturned car called. And they're like, "Oh, we got home. We're just fine." And so the lieutenant says to him at the end of the shift, he says, "I told the chief that when you came off the road, you're going to do one of two things. Either you're going to quit or you're going to be a pretty good cop." And so, I mean,
that's great.
I thought, it's not, I've been listening to this podcast a long time, right? It's not like some of the hut calls, but, I think, when I think about law enforcement, the small town cops, these are like the backbone of law enforcement in the United States, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because rural departments are everywhere.
And majority of the departments are rural.
And the majority of departments are rural, right? And what you've got to handle, and how they didn't have field training officers, right? You did a ride along.
For 800 hours.
For 800 hours,
Crazy.
Right? And then the chief hands you a badge and a gun, and you say, go for it. The selectman will approve you later. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
It's amazing.
That is a hell of a night for anybody that's new. For anybody that's not new.
Anybody.
Yeah, that call after call, like all serious calls, and you're alone. I mean, that's one of the big things when you become a new cop is like knowing where your resources are. You don't know where they are. You're told in like the modern field training, like, "I'll call this number, call that person, call this accident recon, blah, 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 blah."
Yeah.
But then when it actually happens, it's a different story because you're pumped. You're not thinking like, all right, you're not thinking strategically.
Yeah.
And here your dad is broken in old school.
Yeah.
With ride-alongs,
Yeah.
getting that thrown at. I mean, that's nuts.
It's funny you said you're talking about get pumped and you're not exactly thinking clearly. It's a great segue, by the way. I'll tell you one of my own stories.
Perfect.
So, honestly, the very first time like my blood really, really got going was my very first call, and it was cool. Like it was a cool, gallows humor again, right?
Right.
Okay. So, Sun City, I was assigned to the squad. That's what I wanted. Here's another throwback reference, right? Emergency, right? Squad 51, Engine 51, medical. Yeah. I watched that as a kid. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want that truck. And it was so cool. I got to the station and they had one just like that. I'm like, wow. Like I like my dad, right? It's like Plymouth Fury, Adam 12. Here it is. Anyway, we get called out on a traffic collision, medical aid. Me and my partner jump in, go screaming off. It's wonderful. I'm loving it. I'm running the air horn because I'm on the right seat. And we get there, and it was a Datsun pickup truck. Now, that's a small truck, right? Somehow they had put like 18 or 20 migrants in this Datsun pickup truck, none of whom spoke English, most of whom were probably all of them were illegal. Anyway, somebody lost control of the truck. The truck rolled, and it spilled bodies all over the 215 southbound towards San Diego. So we get there, and we got bodies everywhere, right? So you got to understand, and maybe some of your Southern California guys will know this. The firefighters dress in the exact same uniform as the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. So we're wearing like green dicky pants, right? The tan shirt. We're wearing badges. We got Sam Brown belts, with all of our medical shit. I can say that, right?
Radio, yeah.
Yeah, with all of our medical shit and radios on it. So from a distance, with the exception of the hat, you can't tell that we're not Sheriff's Department.
Right.
So all these illegals see us coming up, and they try to run. And there's guys limping. It looks like the zombie apocalypse, right? Like limbs hanging down, feet dragging as they're
must get away.
And it's there, must get away, and they're running into the brush. And I speak no Spanish whatsoever, right? I'm a New England kid. I have no idea, right? Didn't even take it in high school. My partner's yelling, no, we're the fire department. It's okay. It's okay. Anyway, I just remember thinking to myself, this is going to be the greatest job, right? Like, but a couple of years later, I relocated back. I was doing industrial response. I was working at a chemical facility, boy, it was several years into it. I had started as like a process operator, but at this point I had like an administrative job, and I was spending most of my time coordinating the emergency response team and doing the training, right, for these guys. And I go down to we call it the lead office, and it's just a small office, block concrete construction, where I'm at. I sit down at a desk to pull some files, and I go, and the desk comes right back off the wall, just like right onto my lap. And I'm like, oh, damn, that can't be good, right? So I get up, and there's a door to my left. And I open the door, and the door opens into an alley between chillers, right? And down on the end, then there's the bay door to building 2, which was a dryer room. Mm-hmm. So I open the door right out into the alley. I look down, and dude, it is just like the movies, okay? The rolling black smoke with the sparks and the flames in it is coming up the alley like this, right? And I'm like, oh, shoot. I mean, just like that, right?
Yeah.
Everything slows down. I turn around, I go back in, pull the door shut behind me. And then I could have just like run through the building to where our staging area is and all our equipment. But, you talk about the stupid things you do, like when you get that adrenaline dump. Yeah. No, I ran upstairs, went to my office, got my hard hat, put my hard hat on, ran through the offices, down the other step. I have no idea why, right?
You took the OSHA training seriously.
I took the OSHA training seriously. You really need to put on your hard hat so you can sprint through the offices so you can get... So we get down to the other side. And now my adrenaline is like, I'm really pumped, right? I'd come back. I'd already started as a call firefighter also with Westminster. This facility is right on the line between Fitchburg and Westminster. So the alarms are going off. You can hear sirens coming from both directions, right? They're coming from the city. They're coming from the town. And there's smoke everywhere. And so I throw on some protective gear. I go down into like a street area to kind of get the visual shot of what's going on.
And Tom, this is like Bear, like the aspirin people?
Yeah, Bear, the aspirin people. Yeah.
Okay, so there's some...
Yeah, the place was called, when they opened it up, it was a private place. It was called Chem Design, and then Bear bought it, right?
Okay.
And then sometime after that, Bear dumped it.
So they're always fudging around with all kinds of chemicals.
Yeah. Well, no, this is... I mean, there were flammables, right? What's being dried in this dryer room was a photo... the chemical that you put on photo plates to make circuit boards.
Okay.
Right, so they can burn all those lines in.
Yeah.
All right, this is the 90s, so it's kind of old tech, right? But this photoreactive chemical is what they put on there, and this photoreactive chemical is washed with acetone. So you didn't get the rest of the acetone out of the chemical. You put it in these big pizza ovens, no joke. These pizza ovens had doors, cast iron doors that were 3 inches thick with massive bolts holding them shut, right? And so you draw a vacuum on this. You'd loosen up the bolts so that when the vacuum was released, the door would crack. Anyway, somebody had issued a hot work permit for that building, and there was a welder that went in there. And he was welding something, and a piece of slag dropped off what he was welding, and it hit one of the nitrogen purge lines. And the nitrogen's going through there, like, 5 pounds PSI. It sucks the hot metal into the purge line, sucks it into the dryer, and that spark hits this acetone-enriched environment.
Oh, my gosh.
Blows up, not just blows the door off, it broke it into 3 pieces as it comes off.
Wow.
Ignites everything else, because everything in there is flammable and explosive, right? The whole place goes up. We had 8 guys in there.
Wow.
Right? So when I get down in the street, I look straight down and I can see the walls have been blown off, and they're designed to blow out if something like that happens. and I see lead operator John. I won't say what his last name is. He's standing maybe 75 feet from me. He's black and smoking, like literally
Like a cartoon.
Like a cartoon with smoke coming off of him, right?
Damn.
And I'm like, oh shit, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really bad. And in fact, actually, one of my coworkers, Mike Hamill, whose name I will mention, won EMT of the Year that year because he single-handedly treated all 8 guys who all had more than 50% of their body with third-degree burns and chemical burns. Oof. And he triaged all of them by himself until more help got there. So he absolutely deserves all the accolades in the world. Anyway, the problem was we had a guy missing, right? And, by this time, my adrenaline's screaming. And I'm thinking there are decisions that I want to make that are probably not the brightest decisions because my adrenaline's screaming and it's just that knee-jerk reaction kind of thing, And so we want to go look for the guy. And the fire department's gotten there. Fire department says, we're not going in there. There's chemicals and bad stuff in there. And we don't have the proper equipment for that. You do it, right? And we're like, well, we've got hazmat suits, but they're certainly not flame retardant. It'd be like a shake and bake bag, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to get shrink wrapped.
Right.
But ultimately we know the guy, right?
Right.
And we're hyped up and we're still thinking we're invincible, right? And so we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to do it anyway. And so we put the level 8 suits on, they look like space. You've probably seen them in the movies, right?
Yeah.
Put these level A suits on and we go in there and you can't see anything because there's so much smoke, so much steam, the sprinklers are going. And I'm in this suit now, right? And I'm going like,
oh,
right?
Sounds like a nightmare.
And with my partner, Steve Viscani, and we're moving through and we're like touching things because we figure if the glove melts, no problem, right? Just as long as the whole suit doesn't melt. And we're actually, we did our whole search pattern that way, just reaching out and with the trigger in our head was, if the glove melts, it's bad, we'll back off, right?
Jeez.
So anyway, it was pretty intense. Long story short, the guy had gotten out. It's just in the confusion, I hadn't gotten a good head count, but he was deaf for like 2 months after that because when the place exploded, he was inside one of the dryers.
Oh my god!
So it protected him.
Yeah.
He didn't get burned, but the explosion and the concussion
resonated in there.
Resonated. He lost his hearing for
Wow, that's crazy. It's something I never have thought about. Those plants like that build all this stuff. That we use. Have to have their own response teams. They have to have their own ways of internally dealing with problems that like your local fire department necessarily is not going to have.
Is not going to have.
Just can't afford to have it.
Nope. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Tom, can you tell us about a strange or bizarre thing you or your father dealt with?
Yeah, I think the strange, bizarre one is definitely me. I've told you this story before. It's almost unbelievable. Okay, so back to Sun City again. We had a lot of frequent flyers, right? You can imagine, and we had a lot. There were some folks that were regulars that called us. And they just called us because they wanted us to come to their house. They were lonely. Nobody was talking to them. We'd get something along the lines of, I've got blurry vision. I need somebody to check me out.
I can't blame them because for people who don't know, Sun City and like Paris and stuff, it looks like the surface of Mars in a lot of the places.
It did back then. It doesn't now.
It's like rubble.
It's massively built up.
It's big now, yeah.
It's this huge, they call it Menifee now, right? The city of Menifee. But then it was just like, it was old people, right? All the traffic was golf carts. Right. We got stuck behind a golf cart
It's like
once.
the poor man's Palm Springs.
Sirens going, the lights are going. We're on this. Please pull your cart over. Right. We can't get by, Anyway.
I'm retired.
Yeah. they couldn't hear. They're deaf as doornails. So anyway, we get a call like that, and we get there, and it turns out they needed us to adjust the rabbit ear antennas on their TV.
Oh my gosh.
Right? They didn't have blurry vision. The TV was blurry,
right?
Which is cool. Like, as long as there's not something more important that you need to be doing at the time, right? It's part of the job. But we had this one couple that called all the time, and they were drinkers, like massive alcoholics. We would ask how many drinks you had, and then we'd multiply that by the fifth bottles, right?
Right.
They were drunk as skunks all the time, and they called a lot, and they were BS calls, right? And it got so bad that the station captain talked to the battalion chief, and he said this has become a public safety issue. And as it turns out, there's some regulation. Don't ask me what it was, because this is 33 years ago, right? Where the station captain could file paperwork, and they got put, their residents got put on a do not respond list. Wow. So they could call 911, but we weren't obligated to respond. Right.
You could kind of triage it over the phone.
Or we could respond as able. Right.
Right.
But it was no longer a priority. It's not like we were going to be jumping in the trucks and screaming over there with lights and sirens,
Right.
So anyway, a couple of weeks after that happened, we get toned out, and it's that address. And I'm thinking to myself, that's weird. I didn't think we were going there anymore.
Right.
But we do. And we head over there. And we get there to the outside, and there's a social worker, right? She had been assigned to their case. She said, nobody's answering the door. I can't get in. All right. So here's another thing you need to know about Sun City. Everybody's got bars on their windows and doors, right? It looks like a jail, but reversed,
right.
Because everybody's freaked out about it. And, the building code, they have to have emergency release buttons on the inside of the house. In case the house catches on fire, it pops the thing, and the windows will hinge out, So we get there, and she can't get in. Nobody's answering the door. She doesn't have a key. It was her who called for assistance. So okay. So, out come the tools. And, first we force the barred door. And then we kick in the door. Not like the movies, by the way, just like we force the door.
Right.
And we go inside, and we walk into the living room. Now, mind you, this house is sealed up tight. We get called by somebody on the outside. We go into the living room, and the woman is in her rocking chair, and she's going back and forth like this. And she's like, he's dead, he's dead, he's dead. We're like, whoa. And in the middle of the living room floor is her husband in a huge pool of blood, right? And he's got a hole in his head.
Whoops.
So we're like, we can't do anything. He's quite obviously dead, right? So, there are the obvious signs of death like lividity, decapitation,
sure,
where you can say he's dead and then not do anything, but you still have to wait for the medical examiner to get there and say, oh yeah, he's dead, right? I mean,
yep.
and out there, the medical examiner, it could take hours before you can get the medical examiner, right? So we're waiting, and the sheriff's department shows up, and they're like, oh yeah, this is a murder scene, right? This is absolutely a murder scene. She had to have killed him, right? So they're trying to talk to her, but she's completely out of it. So they're nicely tossing the place. They're looking everywhere, because there's got to be a gun, right?
Right.
I mean, the gun's got to be. They go through. She doesn't have the gun. The gun is nowhere to be found in the entire house. They come out, and the sheriff's like, gun's got to be under the body. He must have did himself, right? And when he fell on top of the gun. Finally, the medical examiner gets there. All right. And by the way, like, I'm a rookie, which is why my partner and I get stuck with waiting for the medical examiner
Naturally.
in a hot, stinking room,
right?
Because it's really starting to reek. So got to do the Vicks vapor rub on the mustache trick, right? You've done that. Yeah, I can see.
It doesn't work for me. I have a very, very weak stomach.
Oh, it works. I thought it worked great.
I'm a gagger.
So, like, this is the medical examiner says, now you can move the body. We're like, thanks, Now we got the messy job. But we get in there, we roll them over because everybody's waiting for the gun, right? No gun. Like, there's no gun at all. Get him up on a gurney in a body bag. He's searched completely. There's no gun. Locked house, barred locked house, 2 people, no gun, just a bullet hole and a lot of blood, right? Nobody ever found the gun. To this day, right? It was that was bizarre.
That's so weird.
That was completely bizarre. I mean, just, what do you do? Eat it?
Yeah.
It really, really weird.
Unless she was like faking or something, or she.
No way. No. She was both crocked and cracked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like mentally, she was completely broken. I had been to that house, I don't know, 12.5 times.
So you knew them. Yeah. That's crazy.
It was really weird. Very bizarre. Very, very bizarre.
I wonder if that's a cold case out there.
I don't know. That'd be really interesting. I went out there, man, when was that? In the early 2000s. I had to go to LA on business. I had a rental car, so I drove out there, with like visions in my head, like there'd still be people I knew, right? This is, 20 years later or whatever.
Bunch of 20-year-old kids. You're like, who are you?
Right, yeah. Who are you? Exactly, right? They're a bunch of young guys. The captain, everybody had retired. Nobody was there anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't ask about it. It was just like one of those weird things,
So weird.
It really was. We had another guy that knocked himself silly. Same kind of situation. We got there, we got called, and we went in there, and it looked like a horror movie scene. There's blood everywhere, blood on the ceiling, blood on the walls, blood on the floor, and the guy is there, and he's got this massive head wound, and we're like, he had to have been assaulted, right? I mean, how do you do this? And it took us like about 45 minutes of crawling around, trying to find the weapon that hit him. And actually, I was underneath the sink, right? And I looked up, and there was a piece of his scalp. And it turns out, he like knocked himself out initially.
Yeah.
But it turns out he was in there trying to fix a leak, an old guy, and got up and just wrapped himself and just gashed his head.
Yeah.
But then he didn't remember. And now he's wandering around his apartment in a daze, and there's like this blood going everywhere.
Yeah. Especially when your skin
Weird
becomes
stuff,
when you get that paper tissue skin.
Yeah.
I found a guy on the Cape, back road, part of my sector, if I was on the overnights, part of my sector, and one of our main roads, and I hadn't driven down it all night. Yeah. I was one of those nights I was having a quiet night. Well, I decided to drive down it at like 3, and I come to this lump of a human in the center on the double yellow, naked, completely covered in blood. I'm like, call it out immediately, run and check on him. I'm trying to figure out like, what was this guy like?
Right.
Did someone do this to this guy? Like his skin is shredded off.
Yep.
So I roll him over. I can see he's older. And what had happened was, it was one of those periods, when people get older and you're trying to decide as the family, like, can they stay at home alone? Is a home health aide enough during the day? Are they safe at night?
Yep.
That was the conversation that was going with the family, and they weren't sure they were there yet to like take grandpa into their house or whatever.
Yeah.
So evidently they should have done it earlier, because what happened was he just left the house at like 2:45 in the morning naked, and he walked through pucker brush and briars naked, and it stripped because he's got that paper tissue skin because he's 85,
right? Stripped
him of his skin and collapsed in the road. It was bizarre.
I've got one kind of like that, but for me it really drives home the difference, the generational difference, and that is we got a call, medical aid. We get there, and we get into the house. The guy's on the floor. He's in his 80s. Okay. And he is like the color of a tomato. He's that sunburned, right? And he's on his hands and knees. And he had pulled the phone down, like phones with phone cords, you know.
Yeah.
But he had pulled the phone down so he could call 911. This is in the late afternoon, all right? But this is what happened. This guy had gone out in the morning. A lot of people in Sun City, instead of grass, they have gravel. Right? Sharp. It's not like little pea stone either.
Right.
I don't know why. But it's that sharp rock gravel. He had gone out around the perimeter. He had flowers planted. So he goes out to water them in the morning before the sun comes up and it gets really hot because this is the desert. Right.
Right.
He falls down while he's watering and he can't get back up again. He spends the entire day
Oh my gosh.
pulling himself across the gravel with his hands.
Yeah.
Right? Which is why he's all cut up on the front side and completely burnt on the back side. Oh. He spends the whole day doing this.
Poor bastard.
Pulls himself into his house, pulls the phone down to call 911. This has got to have taken him, 8 hours or more, you know?
Yeah.
And we're in there and we're thinking, what kind of man has that kind of willpower at 80-something years old?
Right.
To do that, right? Just look up and the pictures that he's got in his dining room where he had made the phone call, they're all pictures of D-Day.
Wow.
Right? He was in the first wave. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the kind of guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's the kind of guy.
Real will to live.
Real will to live. And you saw these, this is why Sun City was so cool, right? Especially for a young guy. You saw these incredible things, like examples. I mean, you look at that and it's tragic. I mean, he recovered.
Right.
Right. But still, I mean, it was tragic. I went to a woman's house. She had broken her femur in a fall in her house, in between the wall and the toilet. I mean, it was a nightmare picking her up. But we got her picked her up. We got her packaged. We get her on a gurney, and as we're going out, I look on the dresser, and it's got a Academy Award on this dresser. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, that's going to be a fake. Right?
Yeah.
So I said, ma'am, is that real? She goes, oh, yes. Right? Like, she's got to be in incredible pain, but they're all incredibly polite, right? Because a different generation.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. She said, my husband, he won the Academy Award in 1920, whatever, for inventing the sound motion picture camera.
Wow.
I'm like, seriously? This is the guy who invented the camera that transitioned from silent movies to talkies. And she had the Academy Award, the Oscar, right there in her house. Dude.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I got a million of them, but we don't have all that time, do we?
That's so cool. Tom, can you tell us about intense or terrifying call that you or your father went on?
Yeah. I think my father had a couple where he came. It was face to face, either looking like I'm going to be shot or I'm going to have to kill somebody. And for him, that was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was trying to figure out, which one to share with you. And I decided, I thought, it was probably just highlighting a couple was the most appropriate thing.
Okay.
Because one of them actually turned into a heartwarming, so I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for the heartwarming part, right?
Yeah.
I'm banking it. But for a small town cop, boy, he came up more times than I would have thought. I've heard police officers say, I've gone my whole career, I've never had to draw my service piece.
Right.
And for somebody who spent his whole career in small towns, if I add him up right, I think he had to draw his piece 4 times where he thought he was going to have to shoot somebody.
Yeah.
And was able to talk his way out of it each of the times. But the one, and I think it's one of the ones, because I remember him telling me this story multiple times. As my dad got older, he would tell the same story.
Right.
But it was
As
so
they
cool,
do.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. But he got to a call and he came around the corner. And the guy had a shotgun. And he had the shotgun pointed at him. And he was like, and he knew the guy, right? You got put the gun down, right? And the guy's like, I'm not going to put the gun down, mother, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
A lot of colorful language. My father says, you got to put the gun down or I'm going to have to shoot you. And as he's saying this, the gun's not going down. And my dad said he was watching the hammer on his service revolver come back. And I'm like,
so he's pulling that trigger
in like slow motion,
Yeah.
And he says he saw it come back and back and back, and finally goes, "Oh, I'm just kidding," and it's not loaded, and he puts the gun down on the ground. But that guy was, within a second and a half of dying.
Yeah.
And I think for him that was probably, pretty terrifying, It was pretty scary or pretty surreal.
Oh, hell yeah. Especially, having a gun pointed at you is bad in any situation, but having a shotgun pointed at you,
yeah,
to me, is the worst.
It's like, it's really hard to miss with a shotgun.
Right.
Pretty much any idiot can hit
You're
something
not
with
getting
a
out of this
shotgun.
without getting
and
shot.
you have no idea what that thing's
That number
loaded
7
with.
bird shot is a double-odd buck.
Yep, absolutely. I think, for me, the most surreal experience I ever had was with Westminster, and I live in Westminster, right? I have been in that town for more than 50 years, with the exception of being born. My parents decided I should be born in California. And I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, but
You're a Californian.
But I was born in Van Nuys,
Yep.
and I think we lasted there like 18 months, and then we were.
I can report
back,
to you now that city is horrible right now.
It used to be cool.
Was it?
Yeah,
It's bad.
Yeah, but I guess I guess Granada Hills and that whole area is just not what it used to be, back in the day. But so when you grow up in a small town, you know everybody, right? So all the cops, all the firefighters, the guys that I was working with, we had gone to elementary school together, and
Right.
and high school together, and gotten in trouble together. And even if you weren't in the same social group, so to speak, everybody knew everybody, right? It's why getting in trouble in a small town is like, it's way worse than getting in trouble in a city.
Right.
Right? Because the police chief will come knocking on your door and tell your parents how bad you screwed up, and then your parents would smack you up the side of the head,
Right.
to put it politely, right? Because that's just the way things were done back then. And I'd like to say that we'd have a lot fewer problems if they were done that way today.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So anyway, I know everybody. Everybody knows me. I'm working call in Westminster. It is, I'm teaching full time. And so I'm sitting in my office preparing my lesson plan. I hear the tones go off, and it's and it says "officer down," right?
Which is not something you hear common in a small
in
town.
a small town.
Yeah.
No way, right? Shots fired, officer down, and I've been at this point. I've been doing this quite a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm like, oh shit, So my mind's like spinning. I had gotten reprimanded. I'll throw this in too, right? Full disclosure. Like I'm almost 60. What are the people going to do? It doesn't matter anymore, right? So, full disclosure, if the call was close enough to my house, I really didn't care. So the rule was you had to go to the station, you get an ambulance or you get an engine, you
Right.
go to a call, right? if the call's between your house and the station, then you can stop.
Right.
Right. I was like, there's many routes to the fire station. You know what I mean? As long as it wasn't in the opposite direction,
you're good.
I was like, if I can get there quick, right? I mean, I got all my medical gear, I got all my stuff, all my turnouts are in my truck, you know. So I got everything I need, you know, at least in my mind.
Believe me, I think where I work, only the officers can go right to the scene, maybe.
Yeah,
because I will be ripping past the fire department with blue lights, and I'll see.
They're coming in the other direction, aren't
to
they?
go to the station,
so they can pick up a truck, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right, I got jacked up for that a couple of times, but this night I wasn't even it wasn't even a question. The call came in. The location that was given was Route 31. That's down where the water park and the hotel is, right?
Okay.
The Great Wolf Lodge.
Yep.
And the wood chip electrical burning plant down there. And for me, that's a mile, right? Maybe 1.1, 1.2. So I don't grab anything. I just grab my keys. I run down to my car, throw the little bubble light on, whoosh, off I go. I jump on Route 2, and you know I'm getting. You can picture this because you've been there before.
Yep.
I'm getting on Route 2. I'm going to get off again the very next exit. It's probably 3/4 of a mile between the two, but I'm doing at least 80 because like I'm super focused, right? As I'm coming off the ramp and getting onto the highway, and Steve, no exaggeration. Like I said, I'm 80 and accelerating. And a state trooper comes by me so fast that not only does he pass me like I'm standing still, but the wake of the cruiser passing me rocked my vehicle, right?
No one speeds like a trooper.
Oh, my goodness. No, unbelievable. Yep. Unbelievable. But that call went out, and here's another thing about small towns, right? You hear a call like that, every cop who is available from a 30-mile radius is going to be coming down, right? So I get off and I get there, and I can't believe this. Like, the call comes in, and I figure I'm going to be one of the first people there. I get there, and it's already a sea of lights, right? A sea of blue lights, a couple of red lights, right? Not many,
right?
Because people are so I get there, I get out of my vehicle, I look straight in front of me. And a ways down, and there's a utility vehicle. Might have been his private truck. I don't remember. So my captain, right? He gets out. He just kind of looks at me. I look at him. Both of us are in our trucks grabbing our stuff. We're hearing over the radio that the shots have been fired. Officer's down. He's in the woods. Nobody knows where he is yet, right? Oof. Folks are looking for him. I see Kevin, captain, who later became the chief. He jumps over the guardrail, and he's like 75 yards up, right? I jump over the guardrail where I am. We just both go into the woods. And we're not thinking like we were thinking, but we weren't, like, it didn't matter. There was nothing over the radio that said anything about the suspect or the scene being secured. It was just like we knew the guys that were in. Like, you know, we knew the guys that you got to go, right? So we find like. Going through the woods, it's going through the brambles. It's the middle of the night, right? So it's super dark, right? And kind of in there, and I'm carrying all my shit and with a flashlight and, you know, listening on the radio, and we're calling out, right? And I see Larry like lying on the ground in a clearing. And so I'm moving towards him, and as I'm moving towards him, Kevin comes in like from my right, and he's like right there, and he gets there. So he gets there first, and I get there right after him, but he's already started an assessment on him. And so I'm just opening my bags and like, what do you need? Right. What do we need? So, so we're working on him. He's been shot 3 times. So it's, kind of like plugging, it's triage, right? I mean, you take care of the big things first, right? Stop all the major bleeding, make sure the airway is clear, make sure he's breathing. And at this point, more and more help starts to arrive, right? And honestly, I don't remember all the radio traffic, right?
Oh, I'm sure it's blur.
And there's a lot of things that are blurred, but there's a lot of things that really stand out too. So we get him packaged up. We get him on a backboard. We got enough people there to carry him back out again. He had been shot through the leg. He had been shot through the hand.
And then defensive, like put his hand up.
It was defensive, and I'm pretty sure it was, and again, years, right? Pretty sure it was his left hand, because he did get off a shot, and it went through his hand defensively, and it went into his jaw. Sorry, took the mic away because I'm pointing, because the people that are listening to a podcast can obviously see me pointing, right? The bullet comes out, shatters his jaw. So we get a team of guys, and he's getting carried out. I'm putting my stuff back together in the bag, and Kevin says to me, "There's another victim, and you need to handle it." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, cool. Where?" He goes, "Over there." So I grab my stuff and I go over there. Like, I'm not thinking. I'm thinking that, there's another cop was shot, right?
Yeah. 2 people were shot by a bad guy.
2 people shot by a bad guy, and I get over there. It's the bad guy.
Oh boy.
So, and I want to tell you, like the conceited, self-righteous, part of me wants to say, and I did my job because that's the kind of guy I am.
Right.
But it was like, training kicks in, right? And like, my job is to, as a firefighter,
it's
right?
a patient, right?
It's a patient. It's your job. You do what you have to do. At that point in time, my brain was able to say, this is a patient, deal with a patient. And I did, right? I get down there, I'm checking out my patient. He's got a gunshot wound to the abdomen. So, I roll him over on top of me. I'm looking for an exit wound. I really have my hands full, and he's complaining he's having difficulty breathing, and there's like nobody there. And, like,
where are the other cops
help.
at?
So at this point, right, this is where it gets surreal. And this is like for real. Okay. This is not an exaggeration or anything. In the movies when a helicopter comes overhead with light, right? And it's like a whoop, 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 right? It was just like that, like time slowed down, and the state police helicopter's overhead in the spotlight, and it's coming down. And I look up, right? And when I look up, because I'm looking for help, right? Because I got this guy to deal with, and I got my hands full, and the cops, there's like 6 or 8 of them, and they're in a semicircle, right? And they're only about 15 feet away, maybe 20 feet, and they all have their guns drawn, and they're all pointed at me and this guy, right?
Not good.
Not good. And they're mad,
right?
And justifiably so, by
Sure.
the way, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, I am down here too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I looked up. I didn't say anything stupid like that, right? Because I'm getting it. And besides, time slowed down. It is very, very surreal, this whole experience, what's going on. And I look up and I said, do you think one of you could give me a hand? And like, it seemed like eternity. Nobody moved. And finally there was this female cop, and I don't remember who she was. I know I did it one time, and I think my father even said, oh, that was, right?
Right.
But one of the very few female police officers that was around
right.
at the time. And she holsters her gun. She puts some gloves on, and she gets down and she starts to help me. And so as I'm working this guy, I'm talking to him because that's what I do. It's kind of like my style. And I'm like, man, what are you doing? So what you doing out here in the middle of the woods tonight, you know? And he starts talking to me. And I'm thinking to myself, actually, this is pretty good, right? And then one of the police, and again, don't know which one it was, said, don't you think we should Miranda him before he says anything else? And another cop says, you don't need to. He's an EMT. Yeah. You know?
You blew it.
You blew it. No, exactly. And that's what it was, right? They're like, you blew it. You should have kept your mouth shut. And Steve, so, you know, all this stuff was going on. And I was really kind of emotionally overwhelmed from everything that had happened before I came over to work with this dirtbag, and I'm yelling in my radio, I need help down here. Like I'm out of oxygen, you know. I need help. And I found out later, they kept asking guys to go in to carry this guy out, and nobody wanted to do it, right? So this is a call fire department, right? For the most part, couple of nobody was going to go into the woods and carry this guy out. And eventually they got people to do it. They were told,
right?
They were voluntold in the strictest possible terms, right? And one of the cops from Princeton, who also happened to be a paramedic, showed up about then, and he was there to help me. But it was a real surreal night. And one of the, I guess you could say, the positive things that came out of it, not very much positive came out of this, by the way. So Larry Jupin died. He didn't die that night. He died in rehab. He threw a clot off of the gunshot wound in his leg, and had a stroke, and it killed him. But the guy who was there, Larry had pulled him over, had pulled over because he was walking along Route 31 in the summertime in a winter ski parka, right? And so when he jumped the fence, Larry went after him. He pulled a gun out. He shot him. But the guy pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, which you could do.
Right.
And there was a huge move after that, that somebody who shot a police officer and shot and killed a police officer would not be allowed to have that plea. And it took a long time, but it was finally passed. It's called Jupin's Law.
Yeah.
And it's not about, it's not about taking somebody who's mentally incompetent and throwing them in prison. It's about taking somebody who's mentally incompetent and never letting them out. Right? It's not like you can go to a hospital and after a couple of years convince a doctor that everything's okay now, right? The bottom line is, he killed a cop, and that's just so. Anyway,
they don't. We don't lock people away forever anymore. We don't. There's some people who should not be circulating. In the public. It's just unsafe, and we let these people go all the time.
I don't know if you can. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, right? I'm not a psychologist. I can't say, is somebody curable? Somebody who's willing to take somebody else's life.
What about the lobotomies from like the 40s? Those were working, weren't they?
Yeah.
Juice them up.
Electric shock treatment.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. You got time for the heartwarming one? Or
yeah, of course.
Are we going too long?
No, absolutely.
All right. So let's do the heartwarming. This was chapter 14 of my dad's book. It's called "Do You Remember Me? I Remember You." So here's the story. It's after midnight, and there's a hurricane coming. The rain was really heavy, the wind was howling, and I was under strict orders to stay in the station until I got a call that was or could become an emergency. Dispatch buzzed the intercom. "Tom, we got a call from a resident who just arrived home from work. They followed a car into the center of town that was seen all over the road. The car was last seen going north on State. The car wasn't hard to find. I was traveling north, hugging the side of the southbound lane. I activated my blue lights, and after some 300 feet, it swerved over into the northbound lane and stopped a couple of feet off the road. I got out of my cruiser and walked up to the driver's window. He was staring ahead. I rapped on the window several times, and he looked at me. Boy, this guy's blitzed. I called for him to put down his window, and he didn't comply. I asked him twice more, and he put it an inch or so down, saying he didn't want to get wet. The water was pouring off my long Dayglow orange raincoat onto my wool trousers, which in less than 2 minutes had wicked up the water to my crotch. I informed him that he could put the window all the way down, or I would do it for him using my flashlight. You can't do that. I was an MP in the Army. I've been to Vietnam. I asked for his license and registration, and he fumbled around for an eternity. I was thoroughly soaked by now, and he handed me his license, which identified him as Ryan Allen Dickerson. It's an alias, obviously. His address was a 40-minute drive from here, and I asked him what he was doing here, and he replied, "I'm looking for the hurricane." Okay, he's just made the team. I ordered him out of the car, asked him to do a few simple field sobriety tests, all of which he failed. I arrested him for operating under the influence, OUI, put him in the back seat of my cruiser, requested a tow truck. After his car was yanked, I drove him to the station for booking. He sat in a cell for the rest of the night, and in the morning, he was arraigned in district court, and that was that, I thought. Sergeant Dick Stevens came up to me the morning of the trial and said he was worried. What about? I said. His attorney said he's pleading guilty to the other moving violations, but not the drunk driving. He must have something up his sleeve. Can you think of anything? Dick said. No, nothing, I replied. Sergeant Stevens put me on the stand and walked me through the events of that night. Under cross-examination, the defense attorney asked about my field sobriety test that I had given. Officer, you testified that the defendant had slurred speech. Do you know that he had a speech impediment? Said the defense attorney with a smirk on his face. No, sir, I replied. Officer, did you know the defendant had defended our country in Vietnam? Yes, geez. Sir, I replied. Officer, did you know the defendant was wounded in the leg in Vietnam? No, sir, I replied. No more questions, said the lawyer. I was excused from the witness stand and returned to my seat. Sergeant Stevens had a very glum look on his face.
So this is back in the day, sorry to interrupt you, when cops tried cases.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
The defense showed the defendant had slurred speech not because of alcohol, but because he had a speech impediment and he couldn't walk straight or stand on one leg because he'd been wounded in the leg during the war. The judge spoke. I see sufficient facts to find the defendant guilty. The sergeant and I exchanged looks and smiled. A very angry and red-faced Ryan Allen Dickerson was arguing with his lawyer. Your Honor, we will appeal. 6 months later, I walked into the Superior Court building and saw Jerry at the court officer's desk, who checked his list and handed me a mileage form. They're trying to find you a courtroom, he said. It looks like it's going to be quite a wait. Lunchtime rolled around. I went downstairs to the cafeteria and ate. Jerry came over and said that I was on at 1. I walked into a very tiny courtroom. The judge, the court officer, the defendant, his lawyer, and myself were the only persons present. The judge put me on the stand. I got halfway through my testimony when the judge banged his gavel and said, I see no reason to proceed further. Guilty. Ryan Allen Dickerson went ballistic. The defense lawyer was physically forcing his client back into his chair. I thanked the judge and left. Several years passed, and now my ex-wife suggested that we start candlepin bowling. We really got into it. Shoes, bags, set of bowling balls, the whole 9 yards. We saw an advertisement at the bowling alley for a team tournament and signed up. The evening the season began, I was at the machine that washes and scrubs the bowling balls. I dried them off, put them in my bag, and began walking back to my wife. I got to the center of the lobby when a guy walked up to me, bouncing a bowling ball from one hand to the other, and he spoke, Do you remember me? No, I replied. I remember you. He was tossing the ball back and forth. I looked at him and thought, Tom, any moment now you're going to eat that bowling ball. Get ready. I slowly moved my right foot slightly to the rear, shifted my weight to that foot, and the guy with the bowling ball spoke. My name is Ryan Dickerson. Oh my gosh, it's him. You arrested me for drunk driving, and you saved my life. He put out his hand and said thank you. Ryan said he'd tried to kill himself several times, but he just couldn't do it. and that night he was determined to commit suicide. He was going to drive into a tree, but with the rain and his intoxication, he couldn't find any trees. And then I came along. He said that his girlfriend had also tried to commit suicide because of him. One day, a friend took him to Alcoholics Anonymous. He had been sober for 3 years, and he and his girlfriend got married, and they had a son, Ryan Jr. He said he goes all over the Commonwealth telling his story at AA meetings of that night when he was out looking for a hurricane. Ryan and his wife, Shirley, my wife, and I formed a team we called the Swizzle Sticks. At the end of the season, we won the trophy for the highest average.
Beautiful, beautiful story.
But only in a small town, you know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of bigger city places or large agencies, you won't get that. You won't get that win, that W.
Yeah.
Down the road.
Yeah.
You know, and it helps.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because that's why you work in a small place.
Yeah.
You can see the fruits of your labor. You can see people get help.
But nothing ever exciting happens in a small town, right? You never get to meet any right. Cool people or anything like that, you know?
Right.
I know my father pulled over a limo years ago, for speeding. He was in Ashburnham. He was coming away from Cushing Academy.
Oh, big money.
Yeah, big money. It was not Whitney Houston. What's Whitney Houston's?
Bobby Brown?
No. The mother. Oh man. Anyway, now see, this would have been a lot better if I could have remembered the name. But yeah, like famous singer, right?
Right.
Coming out of there. You got time for a quick one?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Right. So my dad's talking about training, like no field training officers back then, right? We covered that. But he had a quasi training officer, right? The senior guys are the ones the chief wanted you to ride with.
Break you in.
Right, to break you in, right? And so he uses a bunch of aliases here. I'm pretty sure this guy was Austin Carroll, who lived up the street from us. I remember him because he was a Marine Corps veteran and from the Civil War. Listen to me. From the Korean War. And he gave my father some advice. He was talking about on motor vehicle stops. He says, be polite, right? Let them set the tone because you never know who you're going to be talking to. And he pointed to another officer. Who, when he stops a vehicle, gets out of his cruiser, hitches his pants up, adjusts his mirrored sunglasses, and he said, and strides arrogantly to the vehicle he has stopped with a cigarette dangling from his lips, and his opening words are, give me your papers, right?
Like a German SS.
But, Mr. Carroll says, you could be talking to a lawyer, a judge, the governor, a college professor. Yeah, you might get a little attitude, but what are you stopping me for? Why aren't you looking for the people who broke into my house? Right. Let them set the tone. So my father he absorbs that. And he says a couple of years later, there's a vehicle accident. It's a fatal, right? And the fatal's in front of the old mill. You know where the old mill is, right? And the utility poles and wires are down everywhere, and the street's impassable. And my dad gets assigned to do traffic at an intersection of two streets so it's up by the church, right? Yep. So he's just he's going to be just east of the church, right?
Terrible spot
by
to do
Round
traffic.
Metal, right? And because you've got 2A and everything's intersecting right there, plus on and off Route 2, and the accident is down by the old mill, so they don't want any traffic to go down there. So he's not to let any traffic in the direction of the restaurant. He says, so after 3.5 hours, my frustration level was at maximum. A medical examiner had been requested. And I guess it works this way on both coasts, right? He said, because of low pay, there were only 4 MEs in the entire state, and state law required all fatal motor vehicle accidents to be investigated by the registry. And the world had to go on hold until a registry inspector and an ME showed up on the scene. And he says, suddenly a car blew the stop sign coming off the highway, going towards the accident scene. And he says, I about blew the pee out of my whistle. The car pulled over and stopped, and I stormed across the intersection, bent on giving this moron a piece of my mind, approaching the driver's window from behind, thereby causing the driver to turn in her seat, putting them off balance. And I caught a glint of stars on his shoulder. My eyes dropped to row upon row of ribbons and then to his name tag. I was face to face with General George S. Patton IV.
Wow.
Okay, who was the son of George Jr., the famous World War II general, who in turn became a general. He said, fortunately, his first words were, "Oh, officer, I'm so sorry. I'm late for a speaking engagement at the Old Mill restaurant, and I took the wrong exit and had to come back." He says, I regained my exposure to explain the situation. A quick explanation in the general's name got him a send him down.
Yeah.
From the authorities. And he said, every ride-along I ever had after that got that story.
Yeah.
You know?
Wise words.
Wise words, right? But,
absolutely.
But also very cool. You know?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I pulled over a neighboring town, a guy flying on the highway.
Yeah.
And pulled him over, and I was polite to him. I'm always polite. And he was really impressed that I was polite with him, and with my demeanor. Yeah. And he was going to the neighboring town to interview to be the chief of police. Yeah. Which he then did get the job, Yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm glad I was, polite to the guy.
I think that, my dad, it's a different part of the book. He got offered a chief's job out here in this neck of the woods. I don't know what the town was.
Oh, that'd be interesting to know. Probably one of the hill towns, I bet.
It was,
because those places want you to move to town, set up shop.
There you go.
Yeah.
And you got it. And my mother was insistent that she was like, my kids are going to grow up in the same house I did. And you know where I live, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my family's been there like 5 generations. So I kind of get it on my mother's side of it, but I really feel for my dad because he was offered the job and then he went back and he said, I can't relocate. And they basically said, go pound sand. You can't do the job unless you move into town. And he had been working for it,
Yep.
for a long time. So I'm sure that was a real blow.
That was pretty common back then. Like a sergeant could become chief.
Oh yeah.
In the hill towns, easy. Oh, yeah. So like back then, I mean, even 20, 30 years ago, a lot of the towns out in the hill towns a lot of them have full-time PDs now, but almost all of them back then were like full-time chief maybe, and then like, part-time patrolman.
Yeah, part-time patrolman.
Yeah, so it could have been like Conway, Coleraine, Warwick, Ashfield.
Any of them.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it wasn't, it probably wasn't west of Greenfield.
Probably wasn't crazy far.
It wasn't crazy far.
Right.
If he thought that he could do the job and still live in Westminster, it had to be within, 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. But
yeah,
it's a shame.
That's too bad.
But yeah, it's, you just said 30, 40 and I'm counting on my fingers, right? I'm like, holy smoke, when he started, it was 50 years ago this spring.
Yeah.
50 years ago when he ran that first series of calls.
Yeah,
that blows my mind.
People ask me all the time when my dad retired. I'm like, I thought 5 or 10 years ago, and I'm like, closer to 20 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, okay, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, so he's been retired for 30 years.
A long time.
Well, he's not around anymore, but yeah.
Tom,
unreal.
Could you impart some advice onto new people looking to get into law enforcement, get into being a firefighter, first responder? The new generation coming up, it's a popular question. People love to hear it answered by you guys. And, as you're fully aware, because I know you, we both think right. We think the right way, but we need these people. But it's not exactly as attractive as it was. I mean, all these little towns around here, that was the policy. You do ride-alongs for free for like a year, and then we'll think about cutting you a check for $2 an hour. You know what I mean? That's the way it was because so many people had the heart to serve and wanted it so desperately. We're not there anymore at all. So what would you say to these folks getting into it?
First off, yes. Like, I seriously, please would be the second thing. Like, folks that are young men and women that are thinking about getting into law enforcement or emergency services, the most rewarding careers I think you can possibly have. It comes with baggage, and you've got to expect that.
Right.
In some ways, I think it's different kind of baggage, right? I mean, I grew up a cop's kid. I got the snot beat out of me a couple of times because my father had arrested some guys at a party.
Right.
Whatever. They take it on you when you get back to school, kind of deal. And ultimately, it broke up. My parents' marriage broke up because, my father was a cop. And it
pretty
was
common,
just,
yeah.
And I think it is common. And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, right? What I'm trying to say is you got to go into these careers eyes wide open, right? Eyes wide open, and you've got to have that service mentality. You got to know in your heart. You've got to get your sense of personal satisfaction has to come from knowing that you did a good thing today, right? And it's all right. Forgive me. I'm going to get biblical here. Okay.
Please do. Welcome
right?
it.
So, one of the things that Jesus taught is he said, give to the poor, don't trumpet it, right? Do good deeds, do things, make a difference, but don't be like the Pharisees and stand up and trumpet your good deeds to the whole world so they recognize you.
Right, don't let your left hand see what your right hand's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Don't let but what he meant is do these things because they are the right thing to do. Be humble about it, right?
Yeah.
Your satisfaction needs to come because it makes your heart feel better, right?
100%.
It gives you, it completes you, right? And law enforcement, it's not a power kick. You've got to be a servant leader. You really do.
Yeah.
All the really good cops I know, I know a lot. Right, including the one sitting across from me here. Right.
Oh, thank you.
You guys are, because you understand it's servant leadership. That's what it's about, right? There are times. My father said in one of his stories, he said when he first realized what the thin blue line was, he said sometimes there's justice and sometimes there's just us. You know, I don't know if he stole that from somebody, but it really made me like, wow, yeah, So you got to have that. You got to have that mentality. You got to want to do it. And honestly, on like the fire side of things, fire EMS, it really is this. It's a different set of challenges, but it's the same mentality, right? People often quip, firefighters are the running into the burning buildings when everybody else is running out, right? There's no better example of that than 9/11.
Yeah.
No better example, right? Those guys, absolute heroes. And don't kid yourself. I think a large number of them were like, yep, this is it, right? But they did it because somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
If you're one of those people that can put other people in front of you or ahead of you and go home at night and say, that was a good day, right?
Yep.
Please sign on the bottom line.
Yeah, we need you.
We need all the people like that we can get, because with everybody so hyper-focused on themselves and their rights and their privileges, and it's all about me, and nobody's ever thinking about they, us, we.
Right.
And do that. You got to be a team player. You got to have your partner's back. I don't care what service it is.
Yeah.
You got to be there. You got to be there for each other, whether if it's a dangerous situation or whether you are just back at the station and you need to decompress. Right.
No, that was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
Tom, it's
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure, man. I'm glad we could finally get this done.
Me too.
Got to get you back because I think you would enjoy Cops in the News. Do some topical stuff, stories in the news.
Yeah, I want to talk. That'd be cool.
Crack wise on some stories.
I do. Like every once in a while, I hear about California, especially L.A. Some sheriff arresting a firefighter, right, for like doing his job. We got to talk about this.
Yeah, we get into the wiener measuring in the street with the cops and the firefighters.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about it.
No, it'd be cool, and it'd be great if there was, one of your other guests too. I think that'd be pretty cool because we got to balance things out and got to have a couple of cops for every firefighter in the room.
Right, at least 2-to-1 ratio. All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
You.
It was an honor to finally have you on here. I'm just going to do the outro, and I'll be right back with you.
All right, man. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Tom Connell, finally got the great Tom Connell and the great Tom Connell Sr. represented on the show. Such a blast to do that. So many great stories. Thank you for them for letting those stories loose out into the world. I loved it. I think you guys are going to love it too. So time of the show when we thank the Patreon sponsors. Who are they? Who I'm talking about is Andy Biggs. Big Andy Biggs. I went on his Instagram. The guy's huge. Thank you. Greg Gadboy, Adam Mehall, Chris June, the great Gary Steiner, Jake Pinedo, John Shoemaker, Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, Seth Wright, James Rose, Tony Fahey, everybody, Ben Peters, Braden Walker, Jason Lau, the great Mike Wynn, Sasha McNabb, Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh, hold it down at dispatch, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you, thank you very much, Sean Clifford, Dennis Carrasquillo, love you buddy, Iceman for Motocross Chronicles, check him out, George Tessier, see you at church, brother, Scott Young, the great Tom Connell, everybody, Wayne M. Miller, retired ATF and author, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys, see you at church, Dave Ellman, the great Elliot Sykes, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother, stay safe out there, Christian, Jace Crow, Brad Thompson, Kyle Robert, Zach Haney, the great Nancy Hammond, Clark Lockoff, and the handsome Adam McMahon. Whew, guys, the list is getting long and I like it. Thank you so much for donating and liking the show enough, enjoying the content enough to support it financially. It gets the bills paid at the end of the month, and I love you for it, so thank you. Don't forget to support and check out our sponsor, officerprivacy.com/TPS. Link is in the show notes, and I will see you guys next week.